Right, thanks everyone for joining us today, this afternoon for our webinar on profitability for transitioning organic producers. This webinar is supported by the United States Department of Agriculture Transition to Organic Partnership Program. The TOPP program in South Dakota is administered by the Organic Crop Improvement Association, or OCIA, under a cooperative agreement to the South Dakota Specialty Producers Association, and it aims to support farmers in transitioning to organic farming. Today, we have an hour and 5 minutes set aside for this webinar, and there will be time for questions at the end. Sometimes we ask throughout as well, but please use the chat or the Q&A feature if you would like to send in your questions during the presentations, and we will do our best to have them all answered. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela for a quick slide deck from her before we hear from Blake.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Also wanted to mention, for those of you who would like to turn your captions on, closed captioning is available for this session. In your Zoom controls, you should be able to see something that says show captions. You can turn those on if you need to. All right, I have a quick presentation, or well, I thought I did. Okay, I'm having technical difficulties. Well, what we're going to do then, I'll just kind of walk through a little bit ahead of time, and then I'll turn it over to Blake what I wanted to share. The main thing what I wanted to share with everyone on this call is just talking about some of the what I call the top 4 programs that is designed for producers in South Dakota to help with transition costs. And so I'm going to kind of kick us off talking about that and then turn over to Blake to talk a little bit more about profitability. But when I was getting started, I was looking for ways to help me with my transition costs. And the number one place that I went to was the USDA NRCS office, and I was able to get incentives and financial assistance through the EQIP program. So if you haven't applied for that as an organic producer, they take applications year round. So you can go down to your office and sign up, and they have lots of financial and technical assistance available to you to help you with helping you kind of cost share some of those things. It can be, planting pollinator habitat in your buffer strips. They have other programs available to help you with nutrient management, pest control, cover cropping, and other transition related efforts to help you comply with the National Organic Program standards. And then the newer standards, or the newer program, is the Organic Transition Initiative, which they can share information about that as well. The other program that I wanted to share, which I think both Blake and I participate in, is the Organic Certification Cost Share Program. This is administered through the USDA Farm Service Agency, and it reimburses you for a portion of the cost for your organic certification. So in South Dakota, you're eligible up to 75% reimbursement of your certification costs, up to $750 per category. So if you're certified for crops and livestock, you would be eligible for up to $1,500. And so for me, it was really nice. I submitted my expense receipts, and I had a check within 2 weeks. So there's a window, I think it's October 31st of every year is the deadline to submit that form for reimbursement of your certification costs. And then I also want to mention about the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. Some of you may be familiar with that. It will help you maintain and improve your conservation activities on your farm, such as soil and water quality, that also align with organic practices. So there's annual payments available for adopting advanced conservation efforts, and some extra financial incentives if you want to do some new conservation activities. And then, like Morgan mentioned, the Transition to Organic Partnership Program is administered by the USDA. The funds come through the USDA, but it's administered under the OCIA TOPP group. There are, I think, 6 different regions in the United States. We're part of the Plains region. And what we do is we support farmers transitioning to organic farming with technical assistance, mentoring, and market development. And so this webinar is part of that program. So the funds for putting this webinar on come through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. In addition, they also provide mentoring and pairing transitioning farmers with experienced organic farmers, as well as financial and educational resources to help you ease that transition period a little bit. So with that, if nobody has any questions about those programs, I am going to turn it over to Blake. He has a slide deck for us, and he's going to be talking about profitability in organic farming during the transition. So Blake, you can go ahead and share your screen.
There we go. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Profitability for transitioning producers. Farm profit is my favorite topic, and I'm honored that Dr. Angela Jackson asked me to speak at this webinar. Profitability is essential for farmers to remain in business and to stay motivated in implementing organic practices long term. I am Blake Burggraff, a recently transitioned organic farmer that uses a variety of crops and cover crops to promote soil health on our farm near Hartford, South Dakota, which is just outside of Sioux Falls. My wife and I have around 200 organic acres and 40 conventional cows that we do cow-calf operation, feeder calves, but we attempt to keep those numbers increasing year over year. What is your favorite season? Pick one: planting, harvesting, grazing, haying, any season. If you had to pick one season to be your favorite, what would you choose? Planting season. Planting season is my favorite season. I love planting season because my office in our house is so much more comfortable than fighting the elements and fixing equipment. I love that I get to make art out of our farm. I call it art because it is a delicate balance between what is best for cash flow, soil health, pollinators, human resources, weather, etc., etc., etc. That list goes on because every choice made in the office has many positives and negatives, and I believe that those need to be balanced for a farm to have the best effect on the farm's family and the environment. My plans are made in this order: field maps with the crops for each field and possibly cover crops, with making sure that there's no rotation restrictions with those crops and cover crops. Then I create a cash flow by the acre and across the farm. I also create a sequence of events with planting, harvesting, grazing, and then I obtain the contracts with a post-harvest plan of where those bushels are going, and I monitor the plans and update changes. So what does that kind of look like? I create my plans on Google Drive because I can access the files from anywhere on any device that's connected to the internet as long as I know my login. This is very handy because I create my plans on an easy-to-use laptop computer, and then I can access those plans at critical times during planting and harvest from my iPhone. Here are a few of those plans. We'll see what we all get into today. Here's just a few that are laid out. So this is the pre-tax, which is obviously for financials at the end of the year. This is organic field records. So that is every action that's done in the field is recorded in that spreadsheet there. This is our crop plan for next year, 2025. That is the planting plan and the harvest plan under that sheet. And then this is the cash flow projection for next year, both across the farm, by the acre, and month by month. Seed cleaner notes, obviously, just to know what we did last year for seed cleaner stuff. This is the balance sheet for 2024 for the bank, and CSD down here is complete seed documentation that I use to track and make sure that I have all of my invoices and all of my seed tags for all the seed that I purchased on our farm. So what does a map look like? Everything must start with a map. So I create the map and divide it into subfields most often because I want a diverse rotation. I don't have enough fields to put an entire 94 acres in of some special crop. We just don't have that many acres, so I'm often dividing into subfields. I keep track of them like this here, where this map is a screenshot off of Google Earth, and then I can just take it into Paint on my computer and paint in these lines and label the fields, and then drop them into this spreadsheet. And on this spreadsheet, I keep track of the organic field number, the acres, the previous cover crop, the crop that's going to be planted, and then the post cover crop. One thing important here was the reason that we have such small fields sometimes is specifically just so that we can tell how different crops work on our farm and how they might work across larger acreages. Once I create a map and verify there are no rotation restrictions over all of our acres, then I verify that we have enough seed, feed, and grazing for that coming year. And I do that by creating rough numbers on the calculator, but making sure that we're creating enough cover crop seed for ourselves, enough alfalfa hay, and enough grass hay for our cows. Then the next big test takes place, calculating cash flow. This can be the most exciting and the most troublesome part of the process, but it has to be done on an acre by acre basis and across the whole farm to see where money might be slipping away. This is a whole farm cash flow that accounts for all the dollars coming into and leaving the farm. All of our farm's numbers have been modified to protect our privacy while giving transparency to beginning farmers with realistic crop prices, yields, and land prices. The key with all these financial tools is the ability to adjust. We can adjust prices and yields to model different market and weather conditions that could change dollars coming into or leaving our farm. It is a simple dollars in versus dollars out, but a couple of tweaks can go a long way. Tweaks like, what would it look like if I grew my own cover crop seed? Or what if I could provide more of my own fertility instead of purchasing chicken litter or whatever else? I ask that maybe Dr. Angela Jackson could read the chat if anyone has some questions about this specific page. If there a specific question comes up, if you could read it over the mic, but I'll go through one
Not any
thing.
yet.
Okay.
Not any yet, Blake. We're good.
Thank you. I will go through this like this. Okay, so first we begin with a crop. So the crop is organic yellow peas. The acres is 34 acres. We planted 35. 1 acre grew up to weeds, so we were able to adjust that, and all the other calculations were put into place to know what profitability would be after that. So here we have 34 acres, price of 18, which is a very realistic food grade yellow pea price. Yield of 30 bushels per acre, which is pretty moderate, a little on the higher side, but pretty moderate. And then that creates the total here, which is calculated across all those. So this here is a calculated formula. Most of all the calculations are formulas. And so what we only have to put in are the acres, price, yield, and pretty much everything else is calculated. So the numbers that we put in are acres, price, yield. The other numbers that we put in are over here on the expense side. And then on the cattle side, we put in the amount, weight, price, and it's calculated. So we really don't have to put in that many numbers, but all of them are so flexible that it gives us all these readouts that are very important to knowing how profitable you are, and then being able to run other scenarios like a drought or like losing an acre to weeds or maybe a few more acres than that, or something like that. So the way that I have this set up is the top is looking at our year and very adjustable year prices. And then down here, more of the calculation takes place. But okay, so we're running through yellow peas. We got our total here. It automatically brings the total to right here, and it gives us the gross amount of bushels, which is important for us to know handling. It's just nice to have that number right there to know as we're changing things, what does it look like handling wise? So the yellow peas here, and then that gets thrown into our total income. All right. So this is a super easy equation. All it is total income minus total expenses is net profit. But you can see all the stuff that goes on in the background to make sure that these numbers are accurate. Because you can make this sheet say whatever you want it to say, but you want it to say what's actually happening on your farm. You want it to be as honest as possible for yourself. Looking across here, we have a few more columns. If you were selling some equipment, I can plug in stuff in here. And this sheet is bigger, is also something I'd mention. I put a lot of extra space into my sheets so I can plug in more stuff. Like there's more columns or more rows than this beneath equipment and custom work and government programs. But I have everything that I'm presenting today squished down so that it fits into the screen really well. But like you could see, if we were selling some equipment to become more profitable, some equipment that we weren't using anymore, if we were able to get some custom work put into here of doing some custom work and making some money. And then we have government payments here, like Dr. Angela Jackson was talking about, is we got lots of different opportunities that are out there because many people want to see what the farmer is doing, and they want to see the farmer doing even more to take care of the land and the water, especially. So here's a private program. I wasn't going to mention the name of it here, but they were paying $3,100 for some conservation stuff that we were doing, and then obviously equip, like Dr. Angela Jackson was talking about. And so all these numbers you can adjust, and then that gives you what's actually going on the farm. So I hope this is I hope everyone's doing this, but in case they're not, we're running through it all because I hope there's something that'll be learned here. Here are some different costs to consider. But you want to make sure you punch in all your costs. So let's just kind of glance over those as a bunch of different costs that go into running an organic farm. Maybe something to consider here is this is how much we bring into the household. We don't have to pay rent for our house or anything because it's part of a work deal that I have. So I don't have to worry about that. But say you're bringing that much money into the house. This is how much net profit the farm has after paying for everything, including the workers, right? So I'm the only worker that gets paid. And so that money goes into our household. And then net profits up here. The best thing I've ever done for myself financially was throw in percentages. Percentages make the numbers make sense. Okay. Without percentages, a lot of this is just kind of hogwash. And you're like, okay, whatever, $25,000 net profit. Yeah, I guess I could work with that. Well, percentages are what make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So I would say a net profit of 20% after everything has been paid for is very moderate, realistic, a very good idea to be shooting for 20% after everything's paid for. And so you're in control of a lot of these numbers, even though they feel uncontrollable. There's so many things that you can do. So what guided me so well with using percentages was the first year I ever started farming. By God's grace, I guess, I realized I should put percentages against all of our expenses. And I'm so happy that I did, because what lit up the first year ever was our fertilizer bill. When the first year I ever started farming, our fertilizer bill for conventional farming was one of the biggest percentages. And that really shocked me, because at the time it was just like $25,000. And I was like, no, it's just $25,000. Like, it's not that big a deal. But across our whole line of expenses, it was one of the biggest ones. And so that led me, how can I reduce my fertilizer cost? Well, that started making me think about regenerative farming. And then from there, it got me thinking, well, can we really get into a spot where we don't pay for fertilizer and we get all of our own fertilizer naturally from our cows and from our cover crops and our rotation? And so that's what one of the big reasons that led us down this path to organic. So I believe percentages are really important. These percentages here are showing how much dollars, so $2,000 is about 1.5% of our total spent for the year. We go down here, the next biggest percent we see, almost 12% spent on seed. So a couple years ago, that guided me that we should be saving our own seed more and more. And so we've brought that percentage down to 12% from where it was before, probably at 18 or 20% spent on seed every year. We'll kind of skip a lot of these smaller numbers. I believe they're pretty negligible. But we come down here, and this is where you really start hitting the meat and potatoes of what we're paying for. We're paying for land, right? And so we can see when you kind of group these all together, because these are all going towards land, pasture rent, 200 acres of farm ground at $300, and then 95 acres of $40 tax, saying that you own 95 acres or something like that. So these are realistic numbers plugged in here, but they're not the actual farm numbers, just to be clear. Are there any questions on the whole farm cash flow?
There aren't any yet, but for the attendees, I'm going to allow you to give you the permissions to unmute your microphone as well, if you prefer to do that rather than type in the chat. Please just make sure that you remute after you ask your question. So we can wait 1 second and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much. What I really like about this is that it's so adjustable. So we could change anything in here to model about any scenario we can think of. And so I'll spend several hours every year, plugging through different numbers and seeing what really is the best plan for our farm and what is going to be the most resilient plan come a drought or losing some acres to weeds, or the price of this goes up or the price of that goes down or whatever. And then that's what I really like about organic, is the fact that we can get contracts, often act of God contracts, and that makes this price a lot more firm here on these different crops. And that's very important, because conventionally this column would be changing every single day, several times a day, right? Because those crop prices are changing all the time unless you are contracting a lot more. So with this whole thing, I'm trying to become more stable, get more stable numbers, and then run through those scenarios. So the contracting is all about this column here, getting that price locked in. But let's move on to an acre by acre cash flow.
We do have
So these
one
are,
question if you can pause.
please, yes.
It says, could you explain the act of God contracts a little bit more?
Oh yeah, we sure can. And we'll get into them more when we get down to the contracts part of it. But an act of God contract can be set up several different ways. The one I'm most familiar with is called a full production, full act of God contract. That means the buyer is assuming they're assuming all the risk, right, of the contract. Okay, so the buyer is saying that we will buy everything you produce on your acres for this price, and you are committing to sell us everything off of those acres for this price. And what the act of God is saying is that if anything happens and that production changes drastically, neither of them are really held responsible in that contract. So that's super great for the farmer. That's giving you a place to go with the product. It's giving you the buyer, and it's giving you the price. And the buyer is assuming the risk that you might not deliver as much as you said. And it's also giving you the flexibility that if you overproduce, they're still behind that to buy the extra product. So that's the absolute best contract you can get. You can get other act of God contracts that are not full production. And that would be a little bit more risk on the farmer. So this is the acre by acre cash flow. It is important to also create an acre by acre cash flow. This can show a person their most profitable crops and fields and help a person choose the best crops and cover crops on a field by field basis. But most importantly, I like to see how profitable each acre is on average. That's so important right here, the average profit per acre across the farm. Excuse me here, I lost my spot. This is important because I believe a diverse crop rotation can increase fertility and decrease weed pressure when managed correctly. So like I'm saying, we're doing this entire spreadsheet, and this is not everything. Keep in mind, this is just enough to fit on this page. So that's what's being calculated here, is just enough to fit on this page. And we're looking at the average dollars per acre, right? Because if we want to get crazy, we can go look at the revenue per acre, and it gets a little crazy when you're getting into some of these crops, right? Of the hemp here and the peas, obviously, they're showing a profit of $370 and $266 per acre. Okay, that's awesome. But you can't just grow hemp and peas. You would be not helping out the soil like you can if you grow hemp and peas in a diverse rotation. So let's walk through a couple of these here. Let's walk through something really profitable and something less profitable. And remember, they're shooting for an average dollars per acre price. And what you need here for an average dollars per acre price is going to be different for every single farm. Remembering that the dollars created here have to be spread back across everything done on the farm. So we don't have a lot of acres, so we need to create a lot more average dollars per acre because we don't have a lot of acres to be able to become out on the other side of having enough money to live off of. So we got to create a lot more dollars per acre. So we'll run through the yellow peas here. Like we said, 34 acres. This is the income I have calculated at the top of the column so that I can just see things fast. So the incomes comes from a yield of, this time we plugged in $35 per acre, and that gave us a gross dollars per acre of $665. And I also threw in a grazing bonus here. And I am wondering why that didn't go up like it was supposed to. So apparently my calculator is broken on this page, or something wasn't set up right when I took this screenshot, because this grazing dollars I was going to put into the income. Keep in mind, if you're giving yourself dollars for grazing after a crop or a cover crop, those dollars, if you're plugging them in as income, they have to be coming from somewhere, right? So just be mindful of what you're doing. So in this specific scenario, I do not have the grazing calculated into income. And that was just a mistake on my part, so I apologize for that. But so with just grain being sold, grazing not calculated, $665 per acre. Well, what was our expense? Well, we're figuring a $9 per acre land price. That's not owned land, or a $300 per acre land price. It's not owned land, no property tax. We interseeded mustard with it. Organic mustard cost us about $9 per acre for, I think, 2 pounds per acre of organic mustard. And then from that, we grew a VNS mustard, and we were able to save our own seeds. So next year, that should be a 0 in that column. And then the crop seed cost us around $90 per acre. And that's lower than what it would be for about any other organic farmer. It just depends who you're getting your contract with and where you're getting the seed from. That's a whole nother story. But if you're going to buy organic yellow pea seed, depending on what contract you had or who you were working with, that number could be a lot higher. It could be like $160 per acre, as high as that. So just keep that in mind. Everyone's scenario is different, and that's why we want flexibility with all this, is so that you could model a run. Okay, I'm going to plug in $160 or whatever it comes out to be to plant 200 pounds per acre of peas. And you could plug that in right there, and it would modify everything. So we get down to it. It's just such a simple equation. It's just your income minus your expense. It gives us the average dollars per acre of $266 on those 34 acres. That gave us a gross revenue of around $9,000 for those acres. But you cannot grow yellow peas anything closer than like 3 years together. You want 3 years of different crops between yellow peas because of the I'm blanking now, but it has to do with root diseases. You cannot grow peas very close together because they create root diseases in the soil for yellow peas, and you'll just keep degrading your ability to grow peas. So let's grow over here to something less profitable. Like I said, the grazing is not calculated. We're on Sudan grass here. I had only about 10 acres of Sudan grass. That's all we needed to make enough hay for our cows this year. But the income, I had it at 6 bales, and then I think I did like $130 per ton, and it came out to around $360. And the grazing dollars are not factored in, but I would say you had about $50 of grazing when you graze after Sudan grass, just because there's so much left in the field if you do one cut and leave it and graze it. And that's what we prefer to do. And so this is 6 bales per acre across 2 cuttings. And I don't really recommend grazing after 2 cuttings anyways, so I'm happy that that number didn't get put into there. That's kind of skewed. But remember, we just want flexibility. We want these calculators to do the work for us, and we want to just think of different scenarios and plug them in. And then we have $370 for the expense. We had land, it's owned land, so we have somewhere around $30 of tax on it. There was nothing interseeded with it, and the crop seed costs about $40 per acre to plant. And just remember, you want to be able to change all these numbers. So gross revenue is around $100 lost across that 10-acre field. And by losing that money, you could value the grazing back into it and make money back. But what's going on there is growing sedan grass really helps the soil. Everybody knows that. Sedan grass is an incredible cover crop, but we're growing it here as a cash crop. This is the only thing that was grown on those 10 acres this year was sedan grass. So it grew up in the spring, smothered out weeds, sequestered nutrients. We baled it twice, and then we have the cows out there grazing it right now. Is anyone asking any questions about this one?
Not yet.
Okay, we could stay here for a little longer. Let's look at this. This is something I really like. Okay, so we had some radishes. They're on ground that's in transition. Say they made around 200 pounds per acre, and we're growing these for our own seed, our own cover crop seed. So I valued that at like $1.50 per pound because that's what it costs to get that's what it costs to get conventional radishes, I believe. So obviously, if with organic, you have to plant organic seed on organic ground. So it becomes so much more valuable to be able to grow your own seed when you're factoring in the fact that you would have had to buy organic seed. So that's what we're looking at here with the dollars in versus dollars out, is you're not bringing in any extra dollars when you save your own seed and plant it. What you're doing is you're saving from spending those dollars out. So with the radishes here, we saved about $300 per acre with having radishes because we didn't have to buy 400 pounds of radish seed to go across. Oh, that's my problem. Okay. We didn't have to buy 400 pounds of radish seed to go across the ground. And then also this has got a program payment plugged into it. So this is saying that in this scenario, EQIP paid like $100 per acre. That might be a little high for some scenarios, but I just also wanted to show that I have a payments column put in here so that you can plug in those payments that you might be getting from any kind of environmental quality initiative or whatnot. And then the cost on those radishes, this is where it gets so great. I like it. So you just have your land cost into it and then the crop seed. And once you take the radishes off, what are you going to do? Well, you just let them grow back as cover crop. So they planted themselves and they provided cover crop seed. All we had to do was plant it, swath it, combine it, clean it, put it back in the drill. And then obviously we have total revenue calculated here across. So this is all the crop dollars coming in on this spreadsheet. Yeah, I just wanted to share that it's so nice to break down things acre by acre to know where that money's slipping through the cracks because different land often costs different dollars. So that's something to consider. You might have to pay tax on some land and not on other land. You might be getting different payments for different land. Some land you might be taking straw off and selling it maybe. There's just so many different scenarios to consider here.
Still no questions.
Okay. I think we'll go through the hemp just real quick because I want to introduce people to hemp and then we'll go from there. So we grow organic hemp for grain and for fiber. So that's what is going on here is we have grain dollars and straw dollars. On the organic grain side, it was about $645 of grain dollars coming in and then $178 of straw dollars coming in. And then the expense to it, say you got $300 on land, say you own it, $30 of tax. Our interseed that we put with the hemp was just $3. The crop seed was around $120. And so it grows up, smothers out the weeds, and then we just come back and harvest it, right? So the revenue is around $370, and then gross revenue around $5,000 on 15 acres. So yeah, definitely there's stuff out there that people want you to grow because there's such a demand for it. And I'd say hemp is one of those things, and I'll share where to get a contract for the hemp. So let's move on here. Why do we want such a crazy list of all these different crops we want to grow? Why do we want it to be so complicated? Why can't we just grow a couple crops and keep it simple? Well, these pictures were all taken at the same time in the spring, right? So this is the last 3 days of May I took these 3 photos. On the pea field, we have a thick pea crop growing. The flowers are starting on the peas. The mustard's been flowering for about a week or so. Over here, we have our radishes that we're growing for our own seed. The field is blooming white, or has been blooming white. The flowers are starting to die down. And we got some nice big thick leaves out there protecting the soil and bringing in sunlight. And at the same time, I have a field that's been tilled several times of alfalfa because that's the only way I know of getting rid of it. These 2 crops were no-tilled into the ground, but this crop had to be tilled because of the alfalfa before it, and I'm planting milo out here. Just look, I feel like this explains everything that I'm trying to do. Is we're got all this space for pollinators and birds and for growing our own fertility and protecting the soil and bringing in sunlight. And at the same time, I also have some acres that aren't doing that. And I just think that it's so important to be able to balance all of that instead of having a whole bunch of soil disruption at once. Or the other fact is that as these flowers die, there's other flowers on the farm that start to come in. And I'm really proud of that. Like I said, those 2 crops were no-tilled, so I'm just going to show that we do a lot with no-till. These are yellow peas being no-tilled into the ground, 2 inches deep here. You can see the residue on the surface and the nice dark black dirt that they're going into. And over here, this is after buckwheat harvest. You got the nice tall buckwheat stubble, and we're just drilling right into it. So I can talk about no-till a whole bunch if anyone wants to talk about it, but the biggest thing is you just want to have the right technology for it. I believe there's only one drill that I've ever seen that can do everything that I want it to do, and that's this John Deere 750. Any of these John Deere single discs. So we'll be able to see a picture later of how that single disc really works a little bit, but the best thing about it is just no soil disturbance that you can see. So you have to have auto steer to do this because you're putting this stuff in the ground, the residue's falling back over the top. I really have no idea where I've been. But let's jump back into the numbers. So after I've created all this cash flow stuff and make sure that it's going to make sense financially, then I start thinking about planting. How am I going to plant all these different crops? That's laid out here in order of the crops that have to be planted for 2025. You can see here the winter wheat is already planted, so I just have that marked off as seeded. At the top here, it tells you what all these columns are. And this is important because the first thing I have to do this spring is put sweet clover down on these 2 fields. I have the 2 fields labeled here, 26A and 52B. This is the lot number for organics. So if you're not familiar, you have to have organic lot numbers. And so we just lot number everything. And that way we can keep track of what the heck is going on and where it's from on all these different grains. So that's why we have lot numbers here. So on this sweet clover, it goes on field 26A and 52B. The variety is just yellow sweet clover. We're going to drop seed it, which is just a drill that drops the seed on the ground and then the frost works it in. The pounds per acre are 10 on those fields. And then that tells me a total number of pounds. I need around 30 pounds to do that tiny field. And then I need around 400 pounds to do the larger field. So from there, I have to plant, I'm going to put some millet and mustard together on the yellow pea ground. So you can see that these are all the same field except for this one. And so what's going on here is this mustard is getting put down as a spring cover crop. That's going to help us smother weeds, and then we're going to try and grow buckwheat after that. We're just trying something new since it's just 15 acres. And that's what I like about this different type of farming is you have different opportunities that come up, like just different scenarios that are going on. So like a smaller field here, and I can just run that as a trial real quick of what does that look like if I do this. And we're lowering our risk on it because this is mustard that we grew in 2024. We've cleaned it, and now we're just putting it back on the field in 25. And this is just telling us everything to do here. Like, so on that specific field, I have to be putting down 12 pounds instead of the regular 3 pounds for the interseeding mix. And that just tells me I need around 200 pounds to put in the drill when I go out to field 15A. From there, this is the yellow peas. They're seeded 2 inches deep. So that'll get put on with the single disc drill. And we need to be seeding 200 pounds per acre. And our number of pounds needs to be in the drill at that time. We need to have 4,500 for just that field. So what that's telling me is I have to fill the drill more than twice, because we can hold around 2,000 pounds of seed in the drill. So I believe that's super handy, because then it tells me, where does the seed tender need to be? Well, if I need to fill more than twice, I'm going to bring the seed tender to the field. I'm not going to bring this drill back to the farm and fill it. And so I just love having all these numbers laid out in the winter when I got a little bit more time, and I kind of want to be inside in the office, lay out all this stuff. And then when I go out to the field in the spring and I forget right away what the heck I'm supposed to be doing, all I have to do is pull out my phone, pull out this spreadsheet, and look at it. And say I need to adjust something on the fly, I sure can. And I can plug it in right on my phone, and it can run the calculations further for me. Because like what I said, I'm only plugging in like the winter wheat, or the crop, the acres, the lot number, the variety is plugged in by me, the depth's plugged into me, and then the pounds per acre is plugged in, and then it can calculate what I need for bags or pounds or whatever. From there, I don't know what else we really need to cover, because it's just kind of the same thing over and over again. And I haven't filled out the rest of these numbers anyways. It's something I have to get to. But what's most important is it lays it out in order, and then all of a sudden we have a break here. This is when we're done seeding in the spring. Then we're going to seed cover crops after the peas come off. So this is telling me how we're planting 61 acres of cover crop after peas. The depth's obviously going to be around 1 pound, and we're still trying to figure out pounds per acre depending on what kind of seed we have around and what we're going to use. Still kind of monkeying with that. And then we're thinking about flying some radishes onto hemp, but I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. I'm still considering if I'm going to go to mustard as the cover crop with hemp, or using our own radish seed. I don't know. And then after soybeans, we got some conventional ground that we're picking up, and we're splitting it a couple different ways, and some of it's going to conventional soybeans to make the workload a little lighter as we're transitioning through this. And so after the conventional soybeans, we're going to put in winter wheat. And that winter wheat we are saving from our own seed of winter wheat here. And I'll show you how I kind of keep track of that. So that's how we plan the planting. This is how I plan my seed order. So this is just telling you that after I lay out all the crops and how to plant them, then I consolidate everything and just get it broken down into cost and the pounds per acre. It just helps me visualize things better as I'm on the phone calling up for different products and whatnot from different companies. Okay, so we covered planting, but how the heck do we keep track of harvesting all this stuff? Because so much of it, we have to swath it and then combine it, and then we want to clean the seed for next year and sell a whole bunch of it, right? So how do we plan that? Well, it's pretty much the same thing as the planting one. And I just have an order laid out here of what needs to be done. The lot number, I like having the lot number easy to access on all these spreadsheets, because obviously at harvest time, this is when you need to have that lot number right at your tip of your fingers, so you can just pull it up and be like, oh, okay. So the lot number on this, say it's the yellow pea harvest. We're pulling off of field 76B. So my organic lot number is 76B peas 25. Right? And so then I can just write that on the bin or wherever it needs to go, or on the bags or whatnot. And so this is telling me I have to use the swather to swath it and then combine it. Where if we expect, I plug in the number here of saying if we expect 30 pounds per acre, or 30 bushels per acre, excuse me, it multiplies it by the acres we have here, and it gives me gross numbers. Okay, so on this specific field, it's only 22 acres. It's showing me that it's going to create hopefully around 600-700 bushels. And since I have 2 fields of yellow peas, I also come to a grand total of hopefully around 2,000 bushels. This is important for me because I want to know how many wagons to put in each field or whatnot. just to keep things simple. Just pull out my phone and be like, oh, right. So we want around like 2 or 3 wagons in that field so that we can dump right on the wagons and not have to worry about bringing a wagon home and dumping it. And this is our grand total, which tells us how much bin space we need and what it's going to look like to move that product back out, especially when it comes to the contract side of things. It's really nice to have all these numbers just easy to look back if you're on the phone making a contract, or if you're about to make a contract or something. You can look back, plug in some different numbers, see what some things would look like. Say like, well, what if we made another 5 bushels per acre? Well, you plug that right in and it tells you here. That way, you kind of have an idea of what bins you can use and how to save time and labor. And specifically what I like about it is that I can look at this number and be like, okay, you get around 800-900 bushels of peas on a semi, depending on how many axles they have and whatnot. So we're going to need, more than 2 semis at an average yield. So you want to know those numbers, especially if you're talking to a buyer that's going to pick it up, because they want to know approximately how many trucks they're going to need to send your way. But keep in mind, they'll make those calculations too on their own stuff. But I like to have something here that gives me the first baseline to understand when you're going in to negotiate them contracts. And everything's else pretty much the same here until we get down to right here. So seed pounds. I need to know that when I bring in the winter wheat, I want to save 5,200 pounds. And I don't know how specific this is, but so if you're going to save some seed pounds, just in all honesty, you really should not be contracting that many acres of whatever you're doing to a person. So like our winter wheat contract is however many acres I figured out shy of how many acres we actually planted, right? Because though we need to save so much seed, we figured that back into bushels, and then we took those acres off of our contract. It's really good to be honest in your contracts, because that's all you have is honesty in the contracts. Beyond that, what's the point of making a contract? Let's talk about contracts. So I have listed right here the one contract that I'm going to let everybody know about, just because I really like working with Roger Grishus at Healthy Oilseeds, and he's looking for organic hemp. Even more, he's looking for regenerative organic hemp. And he's also looking for just conventional hemp seed. All right. So here's some couple different crops, and we're talking about the importance of contracting. This is so important because I don't have this buckwheat contracted. This is organic buckwheat here. I didn't contract it. The organic hemp was contracted. These peas were contracted. So these were able to leave the farm right away. I'm still sitting on the buckwheat. Do not grow any crop without a contract unless you can accept $0 per acre for that. And only you know the answer to that, and I hope you run it through a cash flow of your own. So we knew that we could take this risk and take $0 from organic buckwheat as we learned more about the market and where to sell things. Because sometimes making these relationships is actually about creating a product first and selling it to someone, and then they kind of know who you are, and then they're maybe more willing to do a contract. That happens sometimes. Sometimes they just understand that what farming's like, and some years you have good years, some years you have less good years. But a lot of contracts are about relationships. I encourage you to reach out to Healthy Oilseeds and think more about growing hemp. Ideally, reach out to more farmers who've grown hemp and talk to them first, and then reach out once you kind of get an idea if you want to grow some. But yeah, that's organic hemp in the background. And this is just the easy phone number to get a hold of Roger Grishus for Healthy Oilseeds, looking for organic hemp and regenerative organic hemp. And that's in Carrington, North Dakota. If you know where that is, it's like an hour north of Jamestown. So just remember that you want contracts. Ideally, you want act of God contracts. This is important because without a contract, you have to be willing to accept $0 per acre if you can't get it sold. Remember, we're in niche markets. That comes with so many pluses and a few minuses. And one of the minuses is you might not be able to sell something for what you thought you were going to sell it for if you didn't have the relationship and the contract in place. But there's not only grain contracts, there are contracts to help us with other things. So you can get contracts with NRCS, you can get contracts with different private groups and whatnot that want to promote soil health. They want to promote better water quality, better soil quality. They want to promote pollinators. There's dollars out there to go help you with this type of farming. So a couple examples here is this is a cover crop. This one was not in equip, but this is a cover crop of our own seed out there that we planted and put back, and the cows are able to graze it. So NRCS pays so much dollars per acre for the cover crop and so many dollars per acre for grazing it. And so the reason this one here isn't paid is because those acres had already been in that program. And with that specific program, it was just for you getting started. So they don't keep paying for that year over year. It's to help you get started. And it sure helped us. It helped us figure out what to do and what not to do. And the biggest takeaway was grow our own cover crop seed and take care of things ourselves, so that we could have more wiggle room if something went wrong. Our dollars per acre on this was probably somewhere around I thought it was like $5 per acre to plant our own cover crop back or something like that. And then if we would have bought it, it'd probably be like, to put that much seed down. That's the next thing, is with so many cover crops that you buy, you can't put as much seed down. So this is probably like 60 pounds per acre of seed between the radishes and the oats that we planted back. And we got more seed, we planted it ourselves and didn't have those dollars sent out as a risk, right? So when dollars leave your farm, you are taking the risk saying, I hope I get them dollars back somehow, right? It's an investment. So no dollars really left our farm. We grew this all on our own, and it was just time and equipment that went into doing this. So our dollars are way less, the risk is way less, and we're able to profit more from it. Another thing NRCS helps with is hay planting. Here's some organic alfalfa seeded in the fall that NRCS helped us with. And then this is just a cover crop that NRCS helped us plant a couple years ago, and it had sunflowers and millet in it and whatnot, and several other things. But because NRCS promotes that you want diverse cover crops to promote soil health, and what we found is we love that, and hopefully we can get back to that. But right now, saving our own seed takes priority just because of cash flow concerns. And we still ended up with a lot of flowers out there. All that white are radish flowers from the radishes blooming again after being planted as a cover crop. I can't remember what time of year this was, but buckwheat harvest was in the middle of August, and I think they were out there grazing in probably September timeframe, anytime in September, and it was already blooming so much. And I'm happy we're out there grazing it to knock those radishes back. We'll see another picture of that cover crop after it grew back after grazing. Oh, here it is. Okay. So we want contracts. We want to manage our cash flow. We want to have plans to make sure that this is possible. So the planting and harvest plan showed us that we really can take on this work and it's manageable for us. So we executed and got the contracts. And then we got into the year, we executed the plans that we made of planting and harvesting and selling the grain in the contracts. Now, as that's all happening and you're actually out in the field doing this stuff, you need to update your plans as things change, whether a yields change or some weeds take over an acre or whatever else you can think of that your plans change. You really should update that back on your sheets and stuff. And that's what I love about Google Drive, is I can just pull that right up on my phone, bada bing, bada boom, change whatever has changed, and it runs the calculations for me. And then we know how we're standing from there. Whether it's a good change or bad change, we can monitor how good or how bad by plugging those in right away and getting a feel for the situation. Definitely note your successes, note your failures. Take pictures. That's how I manage everything. So here's a picture of the regrowth after the cows graze those acres. This is the best organic ground we have because it got manure on it at the right time in the right place and the right amount several years ago, and it just paid out so well. So we're still trying to replicate that across all our ground, but it's just kind of a learning curve of how to do this stuff better, right? So yeah, some of our best ground grew back so good after the cows grazed it and didn't bloom again, which is what I wanted, as I did not want any more blooms out there setting seed or trying to set seed. It was just a way for this cover crop to grow vegetative until the freeze came finally and really killed them off. So take pictures, note your successes, note your failures, understand what's working on your farm, what works on these acres, why does it work there, why doesn't it work somewhere else, and continue to adjust your plans. Be willing to make some changes and monitor if that was a good change or not. So that's kind of what our numbers look like. But what do I believe makes us financially viable as a small operation and during our transition to organic? Well, I honestly believe it's obviously God's grace and our cooperation with that. All the good in our lives comes from God, and there's 4 ways that we cooperate with God's grace that I'd like to share. Maybe 5. Okay. One is the fact that we follow sound financial principles, especially the things Dave Ramsey teaches both in our home and in our farming operation. Second is we often purchase older equipment that we can maintain ourselves. And we build a lot of our own equipment. Here's a seed tender that I built, and this 4-wheeler rack that I built for making fencing so much quicker and easier, and a rack that I built on the back that can carry these big reels, and it can also do our small hand reels. So I'm constantly welding things and making more and more of this and that, and just to increase efficiency on the farm, make sure that when you're out there working, that you're getting stuff done as efficiently as possible. Because if you're out there piddling around, I just feel like you're losing some dollars, because you could totally be spending, if you're just out there piddling around, you could be spending that time with your family or helping out somewhere where you need to help. So I like to make sure when I'm on the farm, I'm trying to get something done and I'm doing it as efficiently as I can. Third is that we clean our own seed and grain. Okay, I believe this is really important because it saves dollars and of just buying stuff, right? Because we're saving our own seed. Second, it teaches you so much about your operation and understanding what's coming through. So you can tell, like, either you're pulling off more light seed or on a certain field, or you're maybe you got a certain weed concern in a field. And with that, learning about how all these different seeds work and how they flow through cleaners and stuff. With that, it helps us understand what intercrops we can grow, how to separate crops better, how to clean up crops better, how to get certain weed seeds out. I think it's just a really good way to become a more well-rounded farmer and understand what's going on after the grain has been harvested and how to manage that even better. But we also clean grain, okay? So say you clean your own seed, that makes a ton of sense. Cleaning grain doesn't always make sense, especially if you're doing what we're doing. This only does like 125 bushels per hour. So say you got 1,800 bushels, it's going to take you almost 18 hours after you set up and take down. So it doesn't really make sense with such an old cleaner. And so we're going to build some more technology. We are building more technology to help us clean faster, building some different cleaners and stuff. But the reason we clean grain is because it helps with food grade storage. Obviously, if you're not putting in a bunch of extra foreign material, you can help keep that grain in a better condition. And then from there, it also helps because some of this grain has tons of foreign material in it. Like buckwheat can have tons and tons of leaf in it. And to be able to get that junk out can save you a lot on transportation. And then it's also just so much better when you send in a sample and it looks really clean. That just helps the processor know that, like, this is a really good person to work with, right? As they take care of things and they make sure that they're not just sending us a bunch of junk to get figured out. It just gives a better look to your farm, I believe. But what I'm trying to say about the foreign material is sometimes you can fill an entire semi truck, say it's a regular corn style hopper bottom where it doesn't have tall sides or maybe it doesn't have any extra axles and stuff. Whatever. You oftentimes can fill those things full of something special like hemp seed, and you won't be anywhere close to how much weight you can actually carry. So I really like the fact of being able to clean up our own grain so that we can get full loads out, which is a lot better dollar-wise on transportation costs. Fourth thing is that we work with family. Even though it's really hard sometimes, I believe the best way to give yourself more financial freedom is helping someone else who is willing to help you back, and then both of you benefiting from each other's equipment and skills. Like I say, I don't know how to explain how hard this can be sometimes. I'm sure everyone here understands, but it's just something that you do not want to give up on, because we can't do this organic thing on our own because it takes so much energy, so much effort, so much different equipment. I don't know how anyone farms on their own. So foster those relationships and work with those people and just do your best to be a good person, even if someone else isn't, because it will benefit you more financially than you can really put into dollars. I hope you liked what you heard. You can find me on Facebook, Blake Burggraff. I also have a company, Facebook, 465 Farmstead Limited. We're just starting our own LLC, or a limited liability company, and that's going to be really coming through next year in 2025. There's a bunch of stuff we got to change over yet, but that is just a really good idea tax-wise sometimes, because there's certain stuff that you can't write off on taxes, obviously, and it's dollars that are leaving the farm, but you will get Social Security tax on them, and that's where it gets really confusing. So I'm not a tax expert. I'm not telling you what to do, but if you are not a company yet and you kind of wonder about becoming a company, I would look into it, because it makes a lot of sense in a lot of places financially to be separate from yourself, to have your own company. And I was going to say fifth and finally, another thing that I really think helps our farm is having cattle. There's just so much you can do, from grazing cover crops to creating your own fertility to allowing yourselves to grow forage crops. I believe without cattle, I don't know how we would do what we do, just because cattle bring so much to the ground and the organic and all together. Having cattle to get the manure from and feed other different crops that you couldn't really grow otherwise profitably. That's everything that I had planned. We can go back to anything if people have questions. And I could open more organic stuff if people would like to see some sheets and whatnot, because that can really help to see how other people do record keeping.
Okay. It looks like we have about 2 minutes left. If anybody has any questions for Blake. That was a really good presentation.
Thank you so much.
It's my second time seeing you present, and never a disappointment. I always learn something.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody have any other questions? So yeah, Blake's using a tool that I also use a lot, which is Google Sheets. I use a lot of the Google programs because it is easy for me to pull it up on my phone. So even if I'm in the field or if I'm outside or wherever I'm at, I can pull it up on my phone and I can edit entries and make entries. As kind of, more and more farmers are using their smartphones, I think, for record keeping. And in organic, with all the record keeping we do, I think it's a smart thing.
If no one else has any questions, I'll ask one. Blake, you talked a lot about that and how you go in and edit the entries. Do you ever, at the beginning of the season, like make a new sheet that has the same information so you can go back and compare like the projections that you had in the beginning to the end result of those different unexpected changes? Or do you just always edit throughout the season?
Thanks for the question. I've really thought about it, but I was thinking it would just be too depressing to look at it of how good I thought the year was going to go and then it slided into something else. And sometimes it goes for the better, but no, I do not keep another sheet, and that's just to keep things simpler. So I just see my projections as projections, and then I have another sheet that I make at the end of the year for taxes, and I kind of compare those two sometimes, but for the most part, I don't see a lot of value in actually keeping the original sheet.
Okay. Well, we don't have any other questions. I think we're out of time. So
Cool.
I want to thank you, Blake, for your time today. It was absolutely amazing as always. And we appreciate those who participated. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at sdspod.organic@gmail.com. And Blake also provided his information too if you have some personal question for Blake.